Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lori Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, Fearless Females. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today our guest is Kim Miles. And I think the thing that struck me the most about Kim is how brave she was. She went from engineering, which is a very steady, stable, very concrete career, to kind of following her passion and really being more of a coach and a guide. And she talks about how sometimes you don't have to have it all figured out in the beginning, but you follow that passion and you really can pivot, change directions, and follow a different path and become who you were always meant to be in the first place. I'm so excited for you to hear about her journey. Let's get started. So we're here with Kim Miles. She's the executive coach and leadership trainer of her own business. And I'm really excited to get to know Kim today. Thanks so much for doing this for us. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome, Lori. I am truly honored to be part of this.
Well, I get really excited when I get to learn new stories and hear new experiences. So I'm really ready to delve in. And my very first question is always, I'm a reader. I love reading everything. And I've got a stack of books really high right now. Tell me, what is your favorite?
So, non-business book, and it is my favorite book of all time, is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, that's cute.
And the reason I've watched it or read it a million times, it seems like, and I really have tried to figure out why is that my favorite book, other than it was the first book that I completed. But I love the story of the underdog who, by luck as well as by character, becomes the hero. Mm-hmm. And it, like I said, this has been a favorite book of mine since I was 9 years old. But I realize that that's what really resonates with me, is there is a certain amount of luck, but there's also his character that allows that luck to really come to full fruition, to something wonderful.
Oh, that's so cute. I do remember my third grade teacher. It was my favorite part of the day. And my third grade teacher would read us those longer books, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was a great book. So yes. I love it. Tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get where you are? What do you do? Talk to us just a little bit about that.
Okay. I'll try to make this a short segment. But so I actually started my career in electrical engineering. And the way I got to engineering was that I was very good at math and science in high school. It came time for graduation, and quite honestly, I was a little bit lazy. So I found the shortest applications for college that were local, and Colorado School of Mines was one of those applications. It was a 2-pager. So I was like, oh, I can do this, knock this out, no problem. So I filled out the application, submitted it, and I got accepted almost immediately. So then I looked at the other applications, and all of them were 7 pages or longer with an essay. And so I went to my mom and said, tell me about the School of Mines. She was so excited that her daughter might become an engineer, and told me all about it, told me that it could be a great career. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not filling out any more applications. So that's how I got into that field. And I found throughout my time in engineering that I loved helping my boss succeed, whether that was in projects or whether that was in financial management or whatever it was. I loved that element of it. And that drove me to various roles because I would get bored within about 18 months. So it drove me to various roles. And then when I had my daughter, I thought I could just do my engineering and not seek any fulfillment in my career. And that was a very short thought. After about a year, I was like, no, I need to really be fulfilled in my career. So that's what sent me down the track of coaching. Mm-hmm. And I went back to school for coaching. I opened my own coaching practice, and then I transitioned into full-time coaching in 2011. And I've been coaching ever since.
That's really interesting. I'll full disclosure, I come from a family of engineers. So my dad and I've got 4 siblings, and every single one of them is an engineer of some sort.
Oh, that's awesome.
So my question is, how in the heck do you get from an engineer? Because I know I've talked to them. They're not people usually to like this executive coaching, which is it's all about people.
Yes. Well, that is one thing that the laziness in high school didn't serve me well. I've always been a people person. And throughout my engineering career, I was told, you don't seem like the typical engineer. And I took that as a compliment. And I was able to do the job. My mind thinks very systematically and logically. And to be quite honest, that's probably one of my challenges as a coach, is that I can get into that problem solving mindset, which is not what a coach does at all. So the transition really was pulling in my natural draw towards people and that systematic thinking and kind of marrying that in a way that would serve my clients well. And when I started coaching, the bulk of my clients were engineers, just because that was the common link. And I could speak their language. I could also draw out some of those human elements that they were not used to needing to deal with at work.
Yeah. I love that. I always said an engineer that can talk to people is like management right off the bat. That's really interesting. Tell me about, if you could look back at the best investment that you made in yourself, and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I did that. It really made a difference in who I am today. What would that be?
I would say that would be the going to coaching school. And the coaching school I went to required us to work through the development exercises that we would then take our clients through. Mm-hmm. And that process, that investment, paid off, tenfold. It paid off in the sense that it helped me learn the coaching skills. It helped me in really with my relationships, personal and professional. And it helped me understand the gifts and talents that I brought, as well as the development areas for myself. So that investment, it really did change my life.
So I didn't realize you went to coaching school. Like, where does one find a coaching? Did you have to fill out an application? Was it a long one?
You did have to fill out an application, and there was an essay. So by that stage, I was a little bit more mature and a little bit more resilient, or maybe not as lazy. And so, at the time, back in 2006 timeframe, which is when I started coaching, there were coaching schools. There were many coaching schools across the world, but the industry itself was not as robust as it is now. Mm-hmm. And over the past 17 years, coaching has become a very, very necessary profession. And COVID certainly accelerated that. And the way that I went about that at the time to find the school was I went online and I looked for coaches and I interviewed them to find out where they went to school.
Oh, good.
And so it was a matter of, I didn't just want to go on the internet and pick a school. I wanted to find a school that produced a coach that I would want to work with, that I could aspire to be like.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And tell me how, did you just wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm done being an engineer. Now I want to be a coach and I'm going to go to coaching school. How did that work?
Yeah, I think that I was in engineering and I was going to work every day and I was able to do the job, but I was not finding the kind of fulfillment that I find in the first 18 months of a role. Mm-hmm. So I knew that I was past that prime time for me. And I didn't want to transition to another company. I wanted to use the skills and I almost had a calling to engage with people more. Mm-hmm. So it was one of those things that I went back and talked to my husband and said, this is the move that I'm thinking about making. And we created a plan in terms of making it a slow roll so that I could go to school while I was engineering, open my practice while I was engineering, and start to reduce the number of hours that I was in engineering. And that's exactly what I did. I was able to find a job that allowed me to work 32 hours, which was just enough time, the additional time plus a little more to start building my coaching practice.
I love that. And that's also a very engineering way of doing things. You're like, I'm going to put a plan. We're going to have goals. We're going to, it's so funny because my brain works in that analytical finance kind of, I like to call myself a financial engineer. So I fit in at family reunions.
Yeah. I love that. Love that.
But that's sort of an idea. So that idea of like consistent and kind of structured change.
Yes.
I think that's so interesting. So tell me, did you get at any point some really bad advice that you're like, oh, and did you take the bad advice or did you not? What did you learn?
That's such a great question because normally people ask, what's the best advice? The worst advice that I was given by many people was you need to find your niche. Once you find your niche, then you can be successful. And the reason that that's bad advice is because nobody knows what their niche is when they're starting a business. You have no clue. It is an evolutionary process. And when people give advice like you have to find your niche, it hijacks your brain and it causes you to feel a pressure that's unnecessary. It causes you to feel like there is a level of perfection that you can find with it. And there isn't. So I did take that advice and then I started trying really hard to figure out what my niche was. And thankfully I had a mentor coach that I had hired, probably 6 months in. I had a mentor coach and then I hired a new one 6 months in. And he was brilliant. His name was Ken Abrams. And he said, Kim, I'm just making this up as I go. And I was like, what? And he says, that's what life is. We just make things up as we go. And he said, you'll find your niche. It will reveal itself as you work with clients. You'll find the clients that you like, that you don't like, et cetera. And that will help you figure out. And he said, I didn't find a niche for many years. So he gave me some permission to not be locked into finding something specific that defined me, that supposedly would impact the trajectory of success for the rest of my life. So.
That's so interesting. We tell 18-year-olds, my daughter just graduated from high school and everyone asks the question you always ask, what are you going to be? What are you going to school for? What are you going to major in? And I find it so hard that at 18 years old, you have to just know what you want to do with the rest of your life. I don't know. I'm a lot older than that. I still I want to do the rest of my life. I'm like, I have an idea, but I like that idea of kind of growing into your niche and kind of figuring out what works for you. And it probably gets more narrow as you work with people and understand. Did you start out with like, hey, it's probably engineers. I'm probably working with executives in the engineer field.
Yeah, I actually started with whoever would allow me to coach them. And my immediate circle was engineers and that made it easy. Mm-hmm. And over time, I did realize that there were specific qualities that I was looking for in terms of coaching clients, and that some of the engineers that I had coached were not great clients and some were fantastic. And then I was able to analyze and figure out where can I find those qualities within the engineering field. And what ended up happening is I noticed that those qualities, span all fields. Uh-huh. So it did allow me to expand and look in other different fields and industries to find those qualities for good clients.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too. Like you kind of, you aren't, I work with engineers with these qualities. You're like, I work with people that want these things. I work best with those sorts of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was an evolution, to get to that language and whatnot. I will say that most engineers, when I say that I was an engineer, there's an instant connection like, oh, she gets me. Mm-hmm. I would say to the extent that I did spend 17 years in the engineering field, I do understand what that world is like, what the pressures are. I understand what they experience. And as a former engineer, I used to say recovering engineer, but people can tend to take offense to that. But as a former engineer, I can relate to the mindset that you have when those things that you experience happen. So it was kind of natural and easy to find clients. And I would say even today, when I have potential engineering clients, they will pick me over folks who have not worked in the engineering industry or don't have any engineering experience.
Yeah, because they know that you get where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What about things you could have done differently? Is there a situation that you look back on and you're like, oh gosh, if I knew then what I know today, that would have gone a lot different?
Well, I look at my life and my career in a way that it's not about regrets. Like I really don't have many regrets over choices that I made because I do believe that God has given me opportunities to evolve and grow into the person that I am.
Mm-hmm.
The things that I look back on and think I don't even want to say I wish I would have done it differently, but if I'm exploring and saying, how could my life be different today if I would have made these choices? I don't even know that I would change much because everything that I do now, I can tie back to something that I learned or experienced or overcame in the past. But I would say if there was something that I would, I don't know, I guess maybe tell my younger self would be to connect the dots while you're going through it. I have a tendency to make my plan, experience it, and then reflect as opposed to be reflecting along the way. And that is something that I learned in coaching is to be reflecting along the way. And I think I may have, maybe would have connected the dots sooner that my love for interacting with people, my love for being analytical and supporting people in, accomplishing things. I may have come to coaching sooner, but honestly, the industry was not as robust as it is now. So
yeah, so it might not have made a difference no matter what you did. So when you talk about like reflecting as you're going through it, is that more of a like an immediate? I do coaching with my team, and one of our questions is always, what would you have done differently? Mm-hmm. And so they look back over the last 2 weeks and think about, what would I have changed or done differently? Like that's an immediate course correction every 2 weeks. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. And honestly, I do that kind of reflection every day now. Mm-hmm. And so I will look back at my day and I look at some specific things like how did I start the day, which includes, did I sleep well? Did I, eat the right breakfast? Did I do the right things to set up my day for success? Then I look at the end of the day, I look and say, how did it go? And what were the things that may have caused any derailments? What were the things that may have caused any successes? And so, again, I think, in my early years, I would probably look back like a lot of folks in corporate look back and say, how did the year go? What would I have done differently of the year? And then when I got into coaching, it was more like what you're talking about. How did the month go? Or maybe how did the quarter go? And as a business owner, it's really for me about the months. But as a human being and figuring out how to enjoy life a little more, it is about the day.
Do you make notes like, hey, this is something that didn't go well today that I want to remember to fix, or this is something I did really well, or how do you use that practically?
Yeah, I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but I actually have a spreadsheet.
I should have guessed.
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet that tracks or measures those specific things like my healthy eating and that. And then I have a notes column in which I write down my notes. What are the things that I'm noticing that I do need to course correct? What are the things that I'm still trying to piece together? So for instance, if I have 3 bad sleeping days in a row, that pretty much is going to guarantee that I'm off. However, if I have 3 bad eating days, not necessarily. So I'm kind of now, again, getting super analytical. I'm like, okay, well, what is it that made my bad eating days? And what were those things that impacted my performance or my experience?
I love that. That's a really great idea. And kind of gives you a sense of centering yourself and reminding, because you make these big goals or you make these even little goals or these monthly goals and stuff like that. But I think often we forget to look back and say, what was our experience today? Did it get us closer to where we were going or who we wanted to be?
Exactly. And for me, and I think I know it is for a lot of my clients, it is so easy to let some of those important things like your sleep or your health, it's easy to let those slip aside. And the impacts are not immediate. And so if you're tracking to that level, you do recognize that the impacts are immediate, but they're small. And it isn't until, and a lot of my clients have experienced this, it isn't until they have a major crash that they're like, oh, I haven't had more than 3 hours of sleep for the past 25 days. You're like, yeah, that might impact your performance.
Yeah. Maybe there's a problem there. Yeah. What about if you could go back and talk to your younger self kind of at the beginning of your journey, that 18 or 20-year-old, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to connect the dots sooner. I would also say everything is going to be fine. Like your journey is going to be fine. You don't need to push. I'm a natural driver. And so when I started engineering, I thought, I want to be successful in engineering. I want to drive. And as things unfolded, I was very comfortable with it. But I think before they unfolded, I was anxious. I was very driven. I was working really, really hard. And had I connected the dots or been a little easier on myself, I probably, would have had a better experience and not worked 70 hours and missed out on some fun things in my 20s.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had other engineers tell me that it's always that fine balance between working a lot, being driven, getting ahead, but also like what do you do that for? Then at the end of your life, you look back and you say, well, did I take enough time with family? Did I spend enough time doing things that I really love to do?
And I think that working in corporate, whatever field, drives a lot of that. In the coaching profession, which is a very different profession, we do focus on what is the experience, what life are you trying to create, or what career are you trying to create? So when I introduce myself and I say that I help leaders navigate the internal mindset and the external leadership challenges, I say to create a career and life that they love. And that's really what my purpose is. That's what drives me, because of the fact that in the corporate world, it's so easy to get lost, and the measures of success are not fulfillment and they're not impact. Oftentimes they're accomplishing a project. They are moving things across the finish line. And that kind of thing. And again, that spans most corporate industries, but coaching is very different in that way. And so that's what's been driving me for the last 17 years.
I love that. That's my mantra as well. I tell everyone, I'm like, you spend too much time working to do something you hate. Make sure that you love what you do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What scared you the most when you started out? Was there something that you were like, and does it still scare you? Or did you figure it out?
Great question. What really scared me the most once I started down the coaching path is my coaching was plan A and engineering became plan B. And my biggest fear was that I would have to go to plan B. And with financial obligations, we had a young daughter. My husband has 2 kids from a previous marriage. So we had 3 kids that we were navigating. We did have those financial obligations. And I myself enjoy and take a lot of pride in being an equal contributor to our financial picture. So I did not ever want to have to go back to that field that was very lucrative in nature to support the value of being an equal partner in our financial picture. So that was probably the scariest thing. And there were points in time in my coaching career in which I thought that might be the case. Like I might have to go back to engineering even part-time just to make ends meet. But thankfully, again, the time that I was entering the coaching world, coaching was exploding. So when I would have that fear, I would have a new opportunity. I would hear about a coaching organization that was hiring affiliate coaches. So it was really by luck that I entered coaching when I did, and that I was able to grow my practice as I was.
How was your husband during this journey and this change? Like, was he so supportive? And he was like, yeah, I know I've been there where you have kids, you've got financial obligations, but you feel called to kind of do this different way of doing things.
Yeah. The great thing is my husband is amazing and wonderful, and he compliments me and I compliment him. He's very low key. He is so supportive. And when I would come stressed out, like, oh, I'm not making the kind of money, he's like, it'll work out. And that was his thoughts the whole time. And that was his attitude. And so if I would get all ratcheted up and excited, he'd be like, you're fine. We're good. It'll work, which I needed. I desperately needed. I'm so grateful that I married someone that is in many ways opposite to me, because of the fact that he could calm me in those anxious times.
That was kind of the answer I was sort of expecting. My husband does exactly the same thing for me. I start getting wound up and he's like, oh, it's going to be fine. How do you know? How do you know it's going to be fine?
Exactly. And I would say that, Mike's calmness and his support and him saying, you always figure things out. He had more confidence in my abilities and capabilities to overcome things. That was never really just overt and saying, you've got this. He's not that kind of cheerleader, but he has that quiet confidence that is what I need.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. Did you deal with any unique challenges because you were a woman?
I've gotten that question a lot. And I've also gotten the question, of my ethnic background. And I would say this, I'm sure that those things came into play for other people, but they never came into play for me. So if somebody was mistreating me, being hard on me, not giving me benefit of the doubt, I never associated it with me being a woman or me being of color. I always associated it with, well, they're a jerk, or they don't know, they don't understand. So it was never about me in my mind. And even when I had people I did have a situation once in which I was wrongfully terminated because I had to go to HR about a sexual harassment thing. And even in that, I was like, well, he's a jerk. Like, it's not about me. It's about him. And even though I was fired because of that, or I guess it wasn't fired, I was laid off, I still was like, well, that's about the organization not having the information and not knowing. So I really have lived my life, I guess maybe even if somebody is racist or sexist, I'm like, that's a thought pattern problem. That's not a something about me problem.
Yeah.
So like I said, I experienced it. I'm sure if it was because of my gender, I didn't take it that way. I was like, oh, they don't understand my thinking or something like that.
I mentioned that my whole family is engineers. Well, my sister is as well. And she talked a little bit about in that field, how hard it was when she was having kids. Like there was no nursing, there was nowhere she could pump for her babies, or like that. Did you run into any of those situations?
In the engineering world, I don't know that I ever noticed any of those things. I was pretty much just focused on the projects and that kind of thing. And I did not have any expectations that an organization would provide specific services or opportunities or something for women. In coaching, it's really fascinating because engineering is a male-dominated world. Coaching is a female-dominated profession.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do find it interesting, my thinking on it when there's a lot of accommodations around women or people of color or something like that. Like it's new for me. It's new to have special accommodations for things. And I did experience this one time when somebody said I was going to do some volunteering coaching, and the organization said, we actually have too many coaches. We have 40 coaches and we only need 30. And I raised my hand and I said, you know what? It's a volunteer opportunity. I'll go ahead and back out because I have other volunteering that I do. And the person said to me, well, we'd really like you to stay because you're a woman of color. And I was like, what? That was so confusing to me. And I told them, I said, you know what? I said, in the same way that I don't want to be not hired because of my gender and my color, I also don't want to be hired just because of that.
Yeah.
Like I want to be hired because I'm an amazing coach, or I want to be hired because I have years of experience, or I want to be hired because I've coached, folks that are similar, but I don't want the filter to be my gender and my color. So it was really interesting. And when I replied that way, the leader of that initiative was very confused and said, I would love to talk to you about that sometime. And I'm like, I'm happy to talk about it. But for me, it felt like I said, I just didn't want to be not hired for those reasons, nor do I want to be hired just for those reasons. So
yeah, it's really interesting. I worked for someone in an industry once, and she was a Black woman, and they would always, like every time they were doing any sort of marketing or anything like that, they would come to her and make sure that she was in those commercials or in that marketing material. And she did start feeling like, hey, I'm like a token, and I am more than just my gender and my race. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what are you most proud of?
In my career, I am most proud of my commitment and dedication to mastery and coaching. And it's something that in my early career of engineering, I did not have commitment to mastery. And so I never felt like I was accomplishing or measuring up to my own standards. When I started coaching, I wanted to be intentional about becoming masterful in the field. And I do feel like that has been a driver for me. It has never been about the credential, the letters behind my name or anything like that. It's about, am I getting better as a coach? And the credential of MCC in the International Coach Federation, like that is the label when you have some mastery. And so that feels good, but I feel like my continued commitment to just keep being a better and better coach is what I am very, very proud of. I don't ever have a time when I'm not learning something new. So for instance, right now I'm in a neuroscience for coaching class. So I'm learning, how can I be better in service of my client? How can I be a better coach? How can I know the skills in the profession at a deeper level? And it feels like such a huge mindset shift and accomplishment relative to my earlier career.
Do you think you maybe weren't in the right seat in your earlier career? Like you weren't passionate about it. You didn't love it. So you didn't. I love finance. Like I'm passionate about it. That's weird. Most people don't. So I want to know all the things about all the different things because I love what I do. Is that kind of what you found? Is that maybe you weren't as passionate?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it was a little bit deceiving because I was very driven. I was driven towards something that I wasn't passionate about, but I could still be excited about it. And so I think that maybe is the distinction, is I was excited, but not passionate.
Yeah. I like that. How did you find that passion for coaching? Was it just when you were helping your, problem solving for your bosses and stuff like that? Like, how did you figure out that that's where you needed to be?
Yeah, it did grow. I mean, obviously, when I connected the dots that I was able to marry engaging with people and helping them accomplish things. And that's what coaching is about. Once I started in the field, I didn't realize that was like a little spark that would become a huge flame. I didn't know that at the time. I knew that there was interest. I knew that some of the things that I had done in my past were, good fodder for what I was going to be doing in my future. But it really was just a little spark, and it grew and grew over time. So
maybe say yes to things, try things. You never know when that spark is going to ignite, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is something that I support and advise my daughter and her friends. And coaching, we don't give advice, but I do advise her to just try. You don't know. And then you can always change your mind. You can always make a new decision. You can always try something different. And over time, you will, collect the pieces to the puzzle that is going to be your life.
Yeah. And you don't have to know that at 18.
No. And you don't have to know that at 50. Real quick side story. I was so honored to get to coach this gentleman who he was on his way to becoming the chief medical officer in a healthcare company. And when I started coaching him, I was like, tell me a little bit about yourself. And he said, well, I started my career as an attorney. Okay. And he had a 15-year career as attorney. And then he decided to become a doctor, and he became an ER doctor, which is one of the hardest roles in terms of the medical field. Right. And then he decided to work toward a chief medical officer role in a healthcare organization, which is the business side of the medical profession. So I'm looking at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, you did these huge, amazing things and you're still going. Like, he's still going. And by the way, I later found out that he also was a musician and he loved baking. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you are a unicorn. So that's one story. My other story is my mentor coach right now. Her name is Fran Fisher. She's amazing. She just turned 80. And she came to me and said, I have these mentor coaching programs, which I went through her program. And she said, I have these mentor coaching programs. And I was completely prepared for her to say, I'm thinking about retirement. But she said, I'm shifting my business. And I'm like, you're 80 years old and you're still thinking in those terms of what's next. And so that's very inspirational for me. Yeah. And I hope that everyone can have that mindset that you get to choose. No matter how old, no matter where you're at, you can choose something different and better, and something's going to bring more fulfillment.
I love that. I really do love that idea. I actually read an article one time about an older lady, 80 or something like that, who learned how to do at the circus where you walk across the rope.
Rope? Oh my God.
Yeah, at 80 years old. And it was just, and I'm like, you really can do anything at any age. You really can. If you have enough passion and enough drive and enough yearning for that, you can really do it. So
yes, exactly. I agree.
So Kim, tell me, do you have any advice for some of our young ladies or listeners who are just starting down this path? You're so successful at what you do. Would you have some advice for them to be successful like you?
Yeah. So if you're starting down the coaching path, I would say get connected with other coaches. Be in community in the field, whether that is just coaching or whether that's your, coaching area of interest. Be in community with like-minded people. I think that's first and foremost. Women who are just starting in their career, I think the idea, taking the time to really understand what's happening, how you're feeling about things, understand where you're seeing those sparks of passion and keeping those top of mind. Because like with my coaching career, it was a spark that really turned into this huge, amazing flame that is going to, be my life's work. So I would say just be as self-aware as you can about what you're experiencing so that you can make those choices and give yourself grace and permission to change your mind with your career.
Oh, I love that. And you set a really good example of that too. It's huge to leave the safety and stability of engineering, especially when you're a spreadsheet driven person to try something that you're not sure you're good at, you haven't done before, and do such an amazing job of just showing up and being really good at what you do and loving it. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us today. If I have listeners that want to get in touch with you or hear more or ask questions, how would they do that?
Yeah, they can certainly find out more information about me at my website, kimlmiles.com. If you leave out the L, you will be finding someone. I don't remember if she's a baker or something else, but you got to have the L in there. So kimlmiles.com. You can also email me at kim@kimlmiles.com. And I'm happy to have any conversations, especially for folks who are starting their career or who are exploring and examining what's next in their career.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time today. I've just loved this conversation. Thank you for doing that for us.
You're so welcome, Lori. It's been my pleasure and a true honor.